Hello, my dear friends. My name is Rosa. I'm 72 years old, and I need to share something that changed my life forever. If you're watching this because you feel invisible in your own home, because someone has betrayed your trust, or because you're wondering if it's too late to start over, please sit with me. I want you to subscribe to this channel and leave a like if my words touch your heart. Write in the comments below. Tell me your story, because I know many of you will see yourselves in mine. This is our safe space to heal together, hermanas. For 45 years I was married to Miguel. 45 years of cooking his arepa every morning, washing his clothes, keeping his house perfect. I thought we were building something sacred together in our little town outside Medellin. 4 beautiful children, a small store, a life that looked blessed from the outside. But last month, I discovered that the man I prayed for every night was having an affair with my sister's daughter, Sofia. 25 years old, the same age as my youngest granddaughter. Your own blood, mi amor. Someone I welcomed into my home after her mother died. Someone I cooked for, someone I treated like the daughter I always wanted. I remember the exact moment everything changed. I came home early from visiting Doña Esperanza. You know how we are with our neighbors, always bringing soup when they're sick. The house was too quiet, but Miguel's truck was outside. I called out, "Miguel, mi vida, I'm home." Silence. Then I heard laughter from our bedroom. That intimate kind of laughter that belongs between lovers. My heart started pounding as I climbed those stairs I'd climbed thousands of times before. The door was slightly open, and there they were, in the bed where I gave birth to his children, where I'd prayed every night for our family's protection. But here's what surprised me most, mis queridas. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse like you see in the telenovelas. Instead, this strange calm washed over me, like the Virgin Mary herself was wrapping me in her protective mantle. I looked at them, Miguel scrambling to cover himself, Sofia's face red with shame, and I simply smiled, a real smile, not the fake one I'd been wearing for years. "Miguel," I said in the calmest voice I'd ever heard come from my mouth, "dinner will be ready in an hour." Then I turned around and walked to the kitchen. That kitchen where I'd prepared over 16,000 meals for this man. That kitchen where I was about to make the most important decision of my entire life. Because in that moment, walking down those stairs, something inside me wasn't breaking. Something was finally waking up. Let me tell you about those 45 years, because every woman watching this will recognize herself in my story. I was 18 when I married Miguel. Young, full of dreams, believing that love meant sacrifice. My mother always said, "Rosa, a good wife makes her husband's life easy, and God will bless your marriage." I had dreams of becoming a teacher, you know. I loved children, loved books, loved the idea of shaping young minds. But when Miguel proposed, everyone said, "Que suerte, what luck. He has his own business. He'll take care of you." So I put away my teaching books and picked up the apron that would define the next 4 decades of my life. In the beginning, I thought I was building something beautiful. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd wake up to prepare his café con leche exactly how he liked it, strong with a touch of panela. I'd iron his shirts while he slept, pack his lunch with love notes tucked inside. When our first baby came, I told myself this was my calling, to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother. But somewhere along the way, Miguel stopped seeing those love notes. He'd come home from the store, throw his dirty clothes on the floor, and expect dinner to be waiting. When I tried to tell him about my day with the children, he'd grunt and turn on the television. When I asked about the store's finances, he'd say, "Don't worry your pretty head about that, Rosa. That's man's work." I worked in that store too, mis queridas. Every afternoon after the children's lunch, I'd go help with customers, count inventory, clean the shelves. But somehow, it was always Miguel's store, never our store. My work was invisible, like I was just another piece of furniture that happened to move around and be useful. The children grew up seeing this. Carlos moved to Bogota for university and never came back. Maria went to Miami and calls once a month out of obligation. Isabel married young and moved to Mexico City, probably running from the example I set for her. I taught my daughters that women disappear into marriage, and I taught my sons that wives exist to serve. When my friends would visit for coffee, they'd say, "Ay, Rosa, you're so lucky Miguel never left you. Look at poor Carmen, alone since her husband died. At least you still have a man." And I'd nod and smile, grateful for the crumbs I was receiving, not realizing I deserved the whole meal. I spent 45 years being grateful that a man who treated me like hired help stayed in the same house as me. I celebrated anniversaries where he forgot the date. I cooked birthday dinners where he didn't come home until midnight, smelling like other women's perfume. But I told myself that's what marriage was: sacrifice, endurance, keeping the family together no matter what. Even when my sister Carmen died 2 years ago, and Sofia started visiting more often, I welcomed her with open arms. I cooked her favorite sancocho, listened to her problems, treated her like the daughter who lived far away. I never imagined she was studying my husband, learning his routines, planning to take what little attention he had left to give. The truth is, I was already alone. I just hadn't admitted it yet. God was trying to warn me, mis queridas. The signs were there like breadcrumbs leading to the truth, but I chose to sweep them away rather than follow where they led. You know how we women are. We see everything, but we convince ourselves we're imagining things. After my sister Carmen passed away, Sofia started coming to our house almost every weekend. "Tia Rosa," she'd say with those big innocent eyes. "I miss my mama so much. Your sancocho reminds me of hers." And my heart would melt, because what woman doesn't want to mother a grieving girl? I'd cook her favorite meals, listen to her cry about missing her mother, give her advice about her job, her boyfriends. I even gave her some of Carmen's jewelry that she'd left to me, because I thought, this poor child needs something to remember her mama by. But Miguel started changing around the same time. Suddenly, this man who hadn't bought new clothes in 10 years was coming home with pressed shirts from the expensive store in town. He started showering twice a day. Twice. In 45 years, I'd barely gotten him to shower once before bed. He bought cologne, mis amigas. Cologne! The same man who used to say, "Why waste money on that foolishness when soap works fine?" was suddenly smelling like he was going to a quinceañera every day. His phone became his best friend. Always face down on the table, always on silent, always in his pocket when he went to the bathroom. When I'd ask, "Who was that calling, mi vida?" he'd snap, "Just business, Rosa. You wouldn't understand. But our little store closed at 6. Who has business at 10 at night?" The worst part was watching them together during Sofia's visits. The way Miguel would suddenly become animated when she walked in, like someone had plugged him into electricity. He'd tell stories I'd never heard, laugh at jokes that weren't funny, offer to drive her places when he hadn't offered to drive me anywhere in years. They'd exchanged looks across the dinner table, little smiles, shared glances when they thought I wasn't watching. But I was always watching, always serving, always there. I just told myself I was being paranoid, that grief makes you see things that aren't there. My comadre Esperanza tried to warn me. One afternoon, over tinto, she said, "Rosa, that girl looks at your husband like he's a piece of sweet bread and she hasn't eaten all day." But I defended them both. "Ay, Esperanza, she's like a daughter to me. And Miguel, he's just being kind to his dead sister-in-law's child." Even when I found Sofia's earring under our living room sofa, I made excuses. Even when Miguel started disappearing for hours, claiming he was helping neighbors with their cars. Even when he stopped touching me completely, not even a hand on my shoulder, I told myself this was normal for couples our age. The biggest sign was that Miguel stopped seeing me as a person. I became background noise in my own home, a servant who happened to sleep in his bed. When did I become so comfortable with being invisible? When did I stop demanding to be seen, respected, loved? If you're watching this and feeling that knot in your stomach because you recognize these signs in your own life, trust that feeling. That's not paranoia, mi amor. That's God protecting you, trying to wake you up before it's too late. I wish I had listened to him sooner. Tuesday, March 15th. I'll never forget that date. It was the day I stopped being a victim of my own life and started becoming the author of my story. I had gone to visit Doña Esperanza that morning. She'd been feeling poorly, and you know how we are. When our neighbors are sick, we bring soup and prayers. I spent the morning making her feel better, reading her passages from the Bible, making sure she had everything she needed. I came home around 2 in the afternoon, earlier than usual. Miguel's old blue pickup was parked in our driveway, which was strange because he always said he had deliveries to make on Tuesdays. The house felt different the moment I opened the front door. Too quiet, like it was holding its breath. "Miguel, mi amor, I'm home," I called out, setting down my purse and the empty soup container. Silence, but not the comfortable silence of an empty house. This was heavy, guilty silence. I started towards the kitchen to prepare his lunch, but then I heard it. Laughter coming from upstairs. Not just any laughter, but soft, intimate laughter. The kind that happens between people sharing secrets, sharing other things. My heart started beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. My legs felt like they were made of concrete as I climbed those stairs I'd climbed thousands of times before. Each step seemed to take forever, and yet I was moving too fast toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. The bedroom door, our bedroom door, was slightly open. Just a crack, but enough. And through that crack, I saw everything I needed to see. There was my husband of 45 years, the man I'd served and loved and prayed for every single day. In our bed with my sister's daughter, in the bed where I'd given birth to his children, where I'd held him through fevers and nightmares, where I'd lain awake so many nights wondering why he'd grown so cold. Miguel was scrambling to cover himself, his face red with shock and shame. Sofia, my Sofia, the girl I'd fed and consoled and loved like my own daughter, was pulling the sheet up to her chin, her eyes wide with terror. But here's what surprised me most, mis queridas. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse like the betrayed wives in the telenovelas. Instead, this supernatural calm washed over me, like the Virgen de Guadalupe herself had wrapped me in her protective mantle. I looked at them, really looked at them, and for the first time in years, I saw clearly. I saw Miguel for what he really was, a man so small that he had to betray his wife, with a girl young enough to be his granddaughter to feel powerful. I saw Sofia for what she really was, a woman who could look me in the eye while planning to destroy my life. And I smiled, a real smile, not the fake ones I'd been wearing for decades. "Miguel," I said in the calmest voice I'd ever heard come from my mouth. "Dinner will be ready in an hour." Then I turned around and walked toward the kitchen, leaving them both sitting there in their shame and confusion. Because in that moment, walking down those stairs, something inside me wasn't breaking. Something was finally, beautifully, powerfully waking up. That kitchen had witnessed 16,000 meals prepared with love for a man who saw me as his personal servant. But that day, it became the birthplace of my new life. I stood there among the ingredients I'd already laid out for Miguel's favorite soup, the ajiaco he always requested on Tuesdays. Potatoes, corn, chicken, guascas. Everything perfectly arranged, just like I'd done thousands of times before. But suddenly, standing there with that ladle in my hand, I started laughing. Not happy laughter, mis queridas. This was different. The kind of laughter that comes when you finally see how absurd your life has become. Here I was, about to cook for a man who had just betrayed me with my own blood in my own bed, under my own roof. I put down that ladle and asked myself a question I hadn't asked in 45 years. "Rosa, what do you want?" Not what Miguel wants for dinner. Not what the children need for their problems. Not what the church expects from a good wife. What do you want, Rosa? The answer came like lightning from heaven. I wanted to matter. I wanted to be seen as more than a pair of hands that cook and clean. I wanted to be valued for more than my ability to disappear into the background of everyone else's life. I walked to the telephone, that old yellow phone hanging on the kitchen wall, and dialed my daughter Maria in Miami. When she answered, I heard my own voice, but it sounded different, stronger, calmer, like it was coming from a woman I was just meeting for the first time. "Mija," I said, "I need you to come home. It's time for Mama to start living." Maria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mama, what happened? You sound different." "I found your father with Sofia in our bedroom today," I said, and the words came out steady as a prayer. And I realized something important. I've been dying slowly for 45 years, and I'm not ready to be buried yet. She started crying immediately. Mama, I'm so sorry. We all knew Papa was, but we didn't know how to tell you. We've been waiting for you to wake up. Waiting for me to wake up. My own children had been watching me disappear and hoping I'd find the strength to save myself. That evening, Miguel came downstairs expecting his ajiaco. Instead, he found me sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of café tinto, still wearing that same calm smile. Where's my dinner, Rosa? He asked, like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just caught him destroying our marriage in the most humiliating way possible. I looked at him, really looked at him, and said, Miguel, for 45 years I've been asking myself how to make you happy. Today I realized I've never once asked how to make myself happy. His face changed then. The confident man who thought he had me trapped in a life of service suddenly looked worried, because for the first time in our marriage, he was looking at a woman who wasn't begging for his approval. Rosa, don't be dramatic. We can work this out. Sofia means nothing to me. But I just kept smiling and sipping my coffee, because I finally understood something beautiful. It didn't matter what Sofia meant to him. What mattered was what I meant to me. I thought my children would be as shocked as I was when they arrived. Maria flew in from Miami, Carlos drove down from Bogota, and Isabel took the first bus from Mexico City. But when I sat them down in our living room and told them what I'd discovered, their faces told a different story. They weren't surprised. They were relieved. Mama, Maria said, holding my hands, we've been waiting for you to wake up for years. We saw how Papa treated you, but every time we tried to talk to you about it, you defended him. I felt like someone had slapped me. What do you mean, mija? I never saw you trying to... Remember when I visited last Christmas? Maria interrupted. Papa didn't come home until 3 in the morning, reeking of alcohol and perfume. When I asked you about it, you said he was helping Don Fernando fix his car. At 3 in the morning, Mama. Carlos, my youngest son, was pacing the room like a caged jaguar. Why did you stay, Mama? Why did you teach us that love looks like suffering? Isabel married the first man who asked because she thought that's what women do. Disappear into their husbands' lives. His words cut deeper than any knife. I realized I had been teaching my children terrible lessons without knowing it. My daughters learned that women should accept crumbs and call it love. My sons learned that wives exist to serve without question. Do you remember? Isabel said quietly. When I was 16 and asked why you never stood up to Papa when he yelled at you, you said, Mija, a good wife keeps peace in the home. I carried that poison into my own marriage, Mama. I almost lost myself completely. Each confession was like a stone hitting my chest. For decades, I thought I was being a good Christian woman, keeping our family together through sacrifice. Instead, I was showing them that love means accepting disrespect, that marriage means losing yourself. The cruelest blow came when I called my sister Elena about Sofia. I expected support, maybe shock that her niece could do such a thing. Instead, she sighed like I was bothering her. Rosa, honestly, what did you expect? You're 72 years old and Sofia is 25. Men need excitement, and you've been the same boring housewife for 40 years. At least Miguel stayed married to you instead of running off with some young woman. I hung up feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. My own sister was blaming me for my husband's betrayal, acting like I should be grateful for being humiliated in my own home. That's when I understood something terrible. This wasn't just about Miguel and Sofia. This was about generations of women teaching each other that we didn't deserve better. We had created a conspiracy of acceptance, convincing ourselves that any man was better than no man, that being disrespected was normal. My children saw the pain in my face. Carlos knelt beside my chair and said, Mama, Elena is wrong. You deserved better then, and you deserve better now. We just wish you had seen it sooner. That night I couldn't sleep in my own bedroom. The guest bed felt like a refuge, but also like exile from my own life. I lay there thinking about all the signs my children had seen that I'd ignored, all the times they'd tried to open my eyes while I kept them firmly shut. For the first time in years, I prayed not for my marriage or my family, but for myself. I asked God to help me understand why I had settled for so little love in a life that could have held so much more. They say news travels fast in small towns, but scandal travels faster than lightning. Within 3 days, everyone in our neighborhood knew about Miguel and Sofia, but the reactions split our community in ways that broke my heart and opened my eyes. Some neighbors crossed the street when they saw me coming. At the mercado, I heard whispers. Poor Rosa. She must not have been taking care of her husband's needs. At her age, what did she expect? She should forgive him and keep the family together like a good Christian woman. Doña Carmen, who'd been my friend for 20 years, actually had the nerve to say, Rosa, men are like children. If you don't give them what they need at home, they'll look somewhere else. Maybe this is God's way of telling you to be a better wife. A better wife? After 45 years of cooking, cleaning, serving, sacrificing everything I was to make that man comfortable, I needed to be better. But then something beautiful happened. Other women started coming to my door. Women I barely knew. Women who had lived their own silent struggles. They brought food and stories, and something I hadn't felt in years. Solidarity. Senora Martinez from 3 houses down knocked on my door with a pot of sancocho. Rosa, she said, 30 years ago, my husband left me for my cousin. Everyone told me it was my fault for getting fat after the babies. But you know what? He was already a cheater before I gained an ounce. Some men are just broken, mija. Even young women surprised me. Patricia, the girl who works at the pharmacy, stopped me after church. Senora Rosa, my generation sees what you're doing. You're showing us we don't have to accept disrespect just because we're women. Thank you for being brave. The biggest shock came from Father Martinez. I went to confession expecting to be told to forgive and return to Miguel like a good Catholic wife. Instead, he looked at me with kind eyes and said, Rosa, God doesn't want his daughters to live as prisoners in their own homes. Sometimes loving yourself is the most Christian thing you can do. But Miguel's reaction was the most telling of all. He wasn't ashamed. He was furious. Furious that I wasn't quietly accepting his betrayal like I had everything else for 45 years. He came storming into the house one evening, slamming doors like a spoiled child. Rosa, people are talking. You're embarrassing me with all this drama. Sofia means nothing to me. It was just a moment of weakness. Stop making such a big deal out of nothing. Nothing. 45 years of marriage destroyed was nothing to him. You're making me look like the villain, he continued, when all I did was make one mistake. Real wives forgive their husbands. They don't air their dirty laundry for the whole town to see. I looked at this man I'd spent half my life serving and saw him clearly for the first time. He wasn't sorry for betraying me. He was angry that I wasn't protecting his reputation by suffering in silence. Miguel, I said, the only mistake I made was waiting 45 years to see who you really are. That's when he got mean. Who's going to want a dried-up old woman like you? You think you can do better than me? You're nothing without me, Rosa. Nothing. But his words didn't sting like they would have a month ago, because I was beginning to understand something powerful. I had never been nothing. I had just been invisible to people who didn't deserve to see me. Miguel thought I'd never leave, because I had nowhere to go. No money of my own. For 45 years, everything was in his name. The house, the store, even our savings account. I was a ghost in my own financial life, completely dependent on a man who saw me as disposable. But my children surprised me. Carlos called his lawyer friend in Bogota, and Maria found a family attorney in Medellin who specialized in women's rights. When we sat down with Doctora Hernandez, she looked at my work-worn hands and said something that changed everything. Senora Rosa, Colombian law recognizes the economic value of domestic work. Every meal you cooked, every shirt you washed, every child you raised, every day you worked in that store without pay, it all has legal value. You're entitled to half of everything you built together. Half of everything. I had never imagined such a thing was possible. For decades, Miguel had controlled every peso, making me ask permission to buy groceries while he spent money on his drinking friends and, apparently, his secret life with Sofia. When Doctora Hernandez presented Miguel with the divorce papers, He looked like someone had told him the world was ending. He actually laughed. That cruel laugh I'd heard so many times when he thought I was being foolish. Rosa wants half? Let her try to prove what she contributed. She never worked a real job in her life. She just cooked and cleaned. Any woman can do that. Any woman can do that. After 45 years of partnership, that's how he saw my contribution to our life together. But the law saw differently. We had records showing I worked in the store every afternoon for 20 years without salary. We had photographs of me at every family business event, every community gathering where I represented our family. We had testimony from neighbors who saw me managing the household finances when Miguel was too drunk to count correctly. Miguel's response was to offer me what he called a generous monthly allowance if I would go quietly and stop embarrassing the family. When I refused, he turned vicious. Suddenly, family members I'd known for decades stopped speaking to me. Sofia's Aunt Patricia called to scream at me. "You're destroying that poor girl's reputation over nothing. Sofia is young and made a mistake. Why are you being so vindictive?" Some of my own grandchildren were told I was breaking up the family and being selfish. My grandson Diego, who I'd raised for 2 years when Carlos was struggling, refused to take my calls. The legal process was humiliating, mis queridas. I had to sit in a cold office and explain to strangers how I'd contributed to a marriage. I had to prove that raising children and managing a household had value, that working in our store without pay counted as work. But the most devastating discovery came when Doctora Hernandez found Miguel's hidden bank account. For 15 years, he'd been secretly moving money there. Money from our store, money from properties I didn't even know we owned. He was planning for this day, she told me gently. He's been preparing to leave you with nothing for a very long time. That night I sat in my daughter's guest room and cried harder than I had since my mother died. Not just because of the money, but because it meant Miguel had been planning my abandonment while I was planning his birthday parties. He'd been calculating how to destroy me while I was calculating how to make him happy. But something else grew from that pain. Determination. This man had stolen 45 years of my life by convincing me I was worthless. He would not steal my future by leaving me penniless. I was going to fight for every peso, every piece of furniture, every share of the life we'd built together, because it was my life too. Everyone kept asking me the same question. "Rosa, when will you forgive Miguel? You're a Christian woman. Surely you know that forgiveness is what God wants." As if forgiving meant I should return to being his unpaid servant. As if love meant accepting betrayal with a smile. I wrestled with this for months, mis queridas. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning feeling guilty for being angry, wondering if my pain was somehow unchristian. I read scripture until my eyes burned, searching for answers about what forgiveness really meant. Father Martinez helped me understand something that changed everything. "Rosa," he said, during one of our long conversations, "Jesus forgave those who crucified him, but he didn't climb back on the cross. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to abuse. It means releasing the poison so it doesn't destroy your own heart." That's when I learned the difference between forgiveness and foolishness. I could forgive Miguel for being a weak man who betrayed his family, but I didn't have to provide him with more opportunities to hurt me. The legal battle took 10 long months. Every court date felt like having my worth measured by strangers. But Doctora Hernandez fought like she was defending her own mother. "Señora Rosa," she'd say, "every woman who wins justice makes it easier for the next woman to claim what's rightfully hers." When the judge announced the settlement, I almost couldn't believe it. Half the house value, half the store, monthly support payments. At 72, I had my own money for the first time since I was 18 years old. Miguel's face in that courtroom was something I'll never forget. Pure shock that the invisible woman had become legally visible, that the servant had demanded her wages. I used my settlement money to move to a small apartment near Maria in Miami. Walking into that empty space with my suitcase and my mother's rosary, I felt like I was being born again. These walls were mine. This space was mine. This life was finally, completely mine. The first thing I did was paint the bedroom yellow, bright, happy yellow that Miguel would have hated. I bought plants and books and a comfortable chair where I could sit by the window and watch the world without anyone asking me to fetch them coffee. I enrolled in English classes at the community college. Can you imagine? A 72-year-old grandmother sitting with teenagers, stumbling over pronunciation, raising my hand to ask questions. Some days I felt foolish, but mostly I felt alive. I joined St. Teresa's church and found a group of women my age who had survived their own battles. We called ourselves Las Mariposas Doradas, the golden butterflies, because we had all emerged from cocoons we thought would be our graves. Every Tuesday, I volunteer at Casa de Esperanza, a shelter for women escaping domestic violence. When young mothers look at me with desperate eyes and say, "I'm too old to start over," I tell them about finding my wings at 72. Miguel married Sofia 4 months after our divorce was final. The wedding photos showed up on Facebook. A small ceremony, just family, both of them trying to look happy. Some neighbors said I should feel vindicated that their great love needed such a quiet celebration. But I felt nothing except relief. Relief that Sofia was now responsible for his dirty laundry, his drunken complaints, his wandering hands. Relief that his emptiness was no longer my problem to fill. 6 months later, Maria told me the neighborhood gossip. Sofia was already complaining about Miguel's drinking, his laziness, his expectation that she would serve him like I had. The fantasy was crashing into reality. I said a prayer for both of them, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I understood that people who build relationships on betrayal have built them on sand. As for me, I was finally building my life on rock. My dear friends, I'm ending this story not from a place of bitterness, but from hope. I'm 72 years old, and I'm just beginning to live authentically. If an old woman from Colombia can find her voice after 45 years of silence, then you can too. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in my story, if you're invisible in your own home, if you're grateful for crumbs while deserving the whole meal, if you've forgotten that you matter, please hear me. It is never too late to choose yourself. I spent 45 years believing that sacrifice equals love, that suffering equals virtue, that enduring abuse equals strength. But real love requires boundaries. Real virtue includes self-respect. Real strength sometimes means walking away from everything familiar to find something true. To the young women watching this, don't wait until you're 72 to demand respect. Don't mistake a man's need for control as proof of his love. Don't give up your dreams because someone convinced you that his dreams matter more. Your voice matters now, not someday when you've earned the right to use it. To the women my age who think it's too late, I'm living proof that it's never too late to bloom. Yes, starting over is scary. Yes, people will judge you. Yes, some family members will call you selfish. But God didn't give you this one precious life to spend it as a prisoner in your own home. To everyone watching, regardless of age, God doesn't want us to be martyrs in our daily lives. The Virgin Mary said yes to God's plan, not yes to every person who wanted to use her. Jesus served others, but he also took time alone to pray and restore his spirit. Even our saviors knew the importance of boundaries. I am not the same Rosa who smiled politely when she caught her husband with another woman. I am not the Rosa who walked to the kitchen planning to cook dinner for a man who had just shattered her world. I am Rosa who chose dignity over familiarity, truth over comfort, herself over everyone else's expectations. Miguel thought he was discarding an old woman nobody would want. Instead, he freed a woman who now knows her worth. Sofia thought she was winning a prize by stealing another woman's husband. Instead, she inherited a man who proved he betrays the women who love him most. This channel has become my mission, hermanas. Share your stories in the comments, the good, the painful, the triumphant. Let's create a community where no woman feels alone in her struggle, where we remind each other that respect isn't negotiable and love shouldn't hurt. Subscribe if my story has touched you. Like this video if you believe women deserve better at every age. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by how much abuse they can endure with a smile. Remember, you are never too old to bloom, never too broken to heal, never too forgotten to matter. God sees you, I see you, And most importantly, you need to learn to see yourself. Your story isn't over until you decide it is. And you, mi querida, you get to write the ending. Until we meet again, keep fighting for your joy. Keep demanding your respect. Keep choosing yourself, even when the whole world tells you that's selfish. This is Rosa, reminding you that the best chapters of your life might be the ones you haven't written yet.